At this point, I'm about $150 into the garage renovation between the 5-gallon bucket of paint, the lights, and then the new electrical outlets and junction boxes to actually be able to run the lights. At this point, I'm happy with the coverage of the paint on the back wall. Now what I'm going to start doing is getting all this stuff out of the way, move the bench over, and then get painted on this next wall. And even though this wall is mostly cured at this point, I'm not going to start hanging things up yet until it's had about a day or two to sit. That way I can be sure that it's fully cured without the risk of something prematurely rubbing it off when I'm initially hanging it up. I definitely recommend the exterior grade semi-gloss paint for anyone else who's trying to do a garage project like this. For one, the cure temp is much lower, and it's only been about 40 to 50 degrees here. It's kind of late fall here in New England. And just feeling this is like a very rugged paint. I don't think this is going to wear much at all from hanging things up, and it's going to take a lot of abuse. That being said, it is on to the next phase. Let's get this going.
Before we can move the bench itself, we have to remove all the things that are on top of the bench. Looking at my local weather forecast, the temperature is going to drop off severely in the next few days, which is going to make it harder for the paint to cure. So for that reason, I'm just trying to get things moved out of the way so I can get the painting done as quickly as possible. That said, I recommend that if you have the time, you sort through all of your objects properly so you can group the tools and your other belongings into correct categories. When you go to permanently store things later, it's going to be much easier for you because everything you have will already be sorted out. Now I'm starting to get the last few objects moved off the table, and the next step is going to be disconnecting the table from the wall to which it's secured. The home inspector, when we were purchasing the house, described the previous homeowner as an ambitious do-it-yourselfer, but definitely not a professional. As such, we're expecting a few surprises when we go to undo this bench that the previous homeowner made. We'd start by removing the pegboard that's mounted behind this workbench, as well as the 2 boards that support the pegboard. After the pegboard's removed, we're diligently inspecting the top and the bottom of this workbench to try to figure out where it's attached, because a quick pull on it shows us that it's not going to freely move on its own. To try to better inspect the lower part of the workbench, you can see that we have to remove more things that are stored on the lower shelf. Additionally, we're going to need to use more force than what a simple tug will exert on this workbench. For this purpose, I'm going to use my car jack to try to lift the bench off of the wall. First of all, I know it can exert several tons of force, and second, it's on wheels, so I know that once the bench is lifted, it'll be easier to roll it out of place using this car jack. Now you can see how easy it is to swing out that one end that's on wheels.
The reason I was having difficulty getting the bench off of the wall is what they did was bolt the 2x4 on the back to the wall, and then come in and bolt the rest of the bench to that. By doing that, they have 4 screws that were going into the wall, and they are entirely covered by the top of the workbench. Nothing a crowbar couldn't fix, but it did leave a little hole in a couple areas. That being said, looking at this looks like a little bit of water damage anyhow, and I know there was a bit of rot on the back side of this window that was supposed to be repaired prior to me taking over the house, but instead what they did is they just took a new board and nailed the new board directly over. So I'm anticipating having to repair this a little bit more next spring. Because I'm not anticipating needing to fix it until at least next year, what I'm going to do now is pull everything on these shelves off and get this portion of this wall and then this back wall painted just so that's all settled.
Against my better judgment, what I'm doing here is putting everything that's on the shelves onto the workbench that I had just previously cleaned off so that I can pull the shelves themselves off of the wall. Once these shelves are fully cleaned off, that'll allow me to remove the shelves and any other nails or screws that are in this wall in order to prep this wall for paint. As with the other wall, the previous owner of the house used a very strange combination of both nails and screws on everything possible to make removal of everything on this wall as difficult as possible for me. Once the final shelving is removed from this wall, I do exactly what I said I was going to try not to do and open up this wall to inspect the water damage from the sill that was rotted out. You can see me prying off the panel with water damage right now.
So rotating around to the back side of this wall is the board that I said was supposed to be replaced prior to me taking over the house, but wasn't. This is literally what it is. That's the level of effort it takes to pull out. Everything under there you can see is pretty rotted, if I'm honest. So my main goal right now is make sure that it's not something that's going to make everything else below substantially worse if I just leave it for the winter rather than doing it now. You can see this faceboard itself actually isn't that bad, even though they, for whatever reason, just put another one nailed into the front of it. It's only really the backing that's in here that's all rotted. And you can kind of, it doesn't show well on the camera, but this is really soft and easily flakes off. So coming back around to the inside, I did already pull off that board just because it was already loose in one corner, so it was easy enough to do, even though I kind of specifically said I wasn't intending to do that right now. So sneaking in through here, if you pull some of this insulation down, you can see it's definitely wet. Right there is some water that's dripping in. A little difficult to tell where from, so it looks like it's coming up above. It's going to be on the other side of this board here, but it doesn't seem like it's really bad enough to justify ripping apart this whole wall right now. I think that's something that can wait till the spring. For the most part, it looks like, again, it looks like it's gonna be this board rotting from the other side or the back side of this board. I know I'm gonna immediately regret doing this, but let's try this one as well. Yeah, you can see straight through to the outside. So it's gonna be this board in here. That's easy enough to get to that I can paint everything else over it and then not worry about having to tear this wall apart too much. So I'm gonna put this all back together, then I'm gonna resume painting. At this point, I have the panel back on the wall. If anyone else is doing this at home in their own house, make sure you don't use the same nail holes when you go to put the thing back up. Basically, you're gonna have a little bit of looseness in there and it's not gonna grab and suck into the wall very well. In addition to getting this back on, I also popped off the cover for the switch and then the outlet. I also had a power strip on the wall. That's now removed. Everything else is a little bit farther back, and now I'm ready to go ahead and start painting this area.